Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Chaplaincy on the Go podcast. I'm your host, Josh Zorhoff, and I am a teaching pastor and a therapist in the West Michigan area. And this podcast is brought to you by the Fearless Chaplaincy and my good friends at Care Portal. Care Portal is a technology platform that helps individuals who are at risk of entering into the foster care system to navigate that well, to get resources and helps through connecting with local and state agencies and local churches and businesses who want to help. And we are grateful for Care Portal, and we're grateful for their partnership in the podcast. And I'm excited to talk to you about something a little different today as we enter into just a short conversation on how do you help people in your life who are struggling. One of the conversations I have with individuals in a therapeutic setting or in a pastoral setting tends to revolve around wanting to help loved ones who are working through some emotional stuff. In our last episode, we talked with Dr. Emily DeYoung about how to care for children as they are working through their emotional things in life, whether that is anxiety or depression or different emotional experiences that may be unpleasant or uncomfortable to either feel or be around. But it's not just limited to children. I've had a lot of conversations over the years with loved ones, whether that's spouses or parents or caregivers or friends or coworkers or colleagues that see someone who is going through a hard time in life and they don't really know how to handle it. And a lot of times, the people who are closest to an individual who is struggling, they often feel the brunt of that emotional experience. And I want to share with you something that I learned years ago from a friend of mine who had been through counseling and had done some of this counseling work in their own life. They shared with me an example of something called a lightning rod, or what he called the closest rod. And I have found this to be incredibly helpful in understanding how we go through life helping people who are hurting and how sometimes we can feel the pain of their emotional experience in our own lives. I'm from the West Michigan area. I grew up in a fairly rural area. And if you've ever grown up in a place where there's a lot of barns and a lot of farms, one thing that you'll note as you look around, especially on older farmhouses or on older barns, is there's typically a lightning rod attached to the top of the barn. And usually it's put on the highest peak or the highest point of the barn. And that's because lightning will hit the highest structure or the highest point. And the reason they put lightning rods on the top of barns is they want to actually have something that is built to absorb the lightning or to soak the lightning, for lack of a better term. And they want to have it intentionally hit that highest point so that lightning doesn't strike anywhere around the barn, whether that's the animals or any equipment. They don't want the lightning to hit other places. They want it to hit the highest point. They want the lightning to hit the closest rod. And here's the point to be made about that. Lightning will strike the closest rod. And in our lives, we tend to look at the lightning striking the closest rod literally and say, oh yeah, that makes sense because that's the closest rod and that's where the lightning is supposed to hit. But we never blame the storm and we never say, well, it's the storm's problem. We just look at the rod and say, yeah, like that's what it's supposed to do. But when it comes to our lives, when it comes to working with, living with, helping with individuals who are going through a really hard time, sometimes we take the brunt of the storm that is brewing in their lives. And they tend to lash out at the people who are closest to them. If you know somebody who's struggling with anxiety, you know somebody who's struggling with depression, you know someone who's struggling with a challenge in life, or it's a challenging season, or they're going through something difficult in their marriage, or they're going through something difficult at work, there's a really good chance that whatever is causing that emotional pain within them, there's a chance that they're going to lash out at the closest rod. And that might be you. Or that might be another person who's close to them, or a loved one, or a spouse, or a child. And though that's not necessarily fair, that is a reality. And it's important to realize sometimes we want to blame the rod, but we actually need to look at the storm or what's going on behind it. With children, sometimes it will come out in behavioral concerns. And as we mentioned in our last episode, sometimes it feels like kids are giving us a hard time, but the truth is they're actually having a hard time. And we just happen to be the closest rod as the parent or as the caregiver or as the person who is closest to the child. And we feel the intensity of that hard time, just like lightning striking a closest rod. Or maybe in your marriage, maybe your spouse is going through a challenging season in work right now. For my wife, I always know that the last month of school before school lets out is a very tense time. And there are times where she might make a comment or she might say something and it just kind of comes out because it's an overflow of whatever she's going through. And I have to kind of soak it. And there are some times where I've had a really long week, or at the end of the week, I've used all of my words and I've met with a lot of people and I'm really tired and it's around 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night on a Friday and I just have nothing left. And I've used everything I have to navigate the week. And my son says something or does something and he doesn't listen like I want him to. And my tone is sharper and I say something in anger and my wife will lovingly put her hand on my arm or say, hey, is everything okay? Or you're really short right now. And what she's communicating is my son has become the closest rod to the frustration of the week. And he's become that easy outlet. Or maybe it's somebody at work, or maybe it's somebody that you know in your life that is struggling in some way, or maybe you're struggling in some way, and that person has become the closest rod and you lash out. And here's what I want to tell you about that. Sometimes it's unavoidable. Sometimes, no matter how well we process through our emotions, no matter how well we do with the challenges in life, our emotions will get the better of us. And the people that are closest to us will bear the brunt of our frustration, or they will bear the brunt of whatever it is that we're going through. They will, in fact, be the closest rod to the lightning storm that is in our soul. And sometimes we will bear the brunt. And I want to give you maybe a thought on that. In the therapy world, we call this a reframe. It's a way of looking at something a little differently, maybe considering it a little differently. If you are in a relationship with someone who is going through a hard time, whether it is a parent or a child or a spouse or a friend or a coworker or a colleague or a boss, but if you're in a close relationship with someone that's going through a hard time and they take it out on you, here's what I want to say. It is a privilege to be the person who is safe enough for that other person to be fully themselves with. Listen, it's a privilege for me to be a husband to a wife who is going through something hard and needs to get some of that stress or some of that frustration out. And I'm the safest person imaginable for her to be that with. It's a privilege to be a father to a son who is going through something difficult. And I bear the brunt of their frustrations or pain because I'm the safest person imaginable. It's a privilege to be a friend or a coworker or a colleague to someone who is going through something significant, is working through a challenge, and I bear the brunt of their frustration. It's not fair. It's not necessarily the way it's supposed to be. Ideally, they would work through their stuff and it wouldn't spill out over into my life. But ultimately, it's a privilege to be that person. And if you are safe enough for someone to share their raw feelings with, that's a privilege and it's a gift. And sometimes it doesn't feel good, but sometimes it's unavoidable. And it's a really rare opportunity to be able to share that space with somebody. It's an opportunity and a gift in some ways to be the closest rod. And if you are, in fact, in a situation where there's some tension, maybe you got into a fight with your spouse, or maybe you're going through some tense moments with your child and they're yelling at you or they're mad at you, or you are in many ways the emotional punching bag to their struggles in life. It could be a closest rod moment. Sometimes it's really important to take some distance from that lightning strike or that hit and say, what's really going on here? Is it this situation? Is it this problem? Is it this instance that is really the issue? Or is there something bigger going on that I'm not seeing? A few nights ago, my son was really struggling with wanting to go outside and play with the kids. And there are some kids in our neighborhood and he was playing with them. And then there's some new kids that moved in and it was getting late. And my wife and I were concerned that maybe it was time to go to bed, but he really wanted to go. And he kind of melted down and he was yelling and getting frustrated. And I was talking to my wife on the phone on the drive home, and she's like, this is what's happening. All of this stuff is going on. And the first thing that popped into my head was, hey, what am I not seeing here? What are we missing? Like, what's going on? What's behind all of this? Well, we're at the end of the year and school's about to let out, and he loves his teacher and he loves his friends and he's going to miss them. And it's possible that all of that was hitting him in that moment, plus exhaustion. And by taking a moment to ask the question, okay, is this the closest rod? And what's the storm brewing in his soul right now, was helpful in processing through and helpful in understanding the situation. It doesn't necessarily excuse his behavior, but it can explain it. And if it can explain it, then it allows for me to practice some curiosity and some compassion, and to have empathy in the moment and seek to understand really what it is that he's going through. And I have found over the years that is such a helpful process to take people through and to view things in. It is so easy to imagine the worst of a situation, the worst of a person, to assume the worst of them, and to say this person is totally off base and they're wrong, or my spouse is a jerk, or whatever it is. You throw a label on it or a term on it. But if we have enough compassion and enough curiosity and enough patience to ask the question, what is really going on in that storm? What's really behind this lightning rod moment? It may just be the key to unlocking a bigger issue and helping the person that we love and seeing them as a person and not as a problem to be fixed, but a person to be loved, to be cared for, because that's the bigger reality. People are not problems. People are people. They're not problems to be fixed or solved. They're people to be loved and understood. And when we look at the closest rod moments and we can have the closest rod conversation, it actually helps us tap into all kinds of understanding and a different level of love and compassion for the people that we're journeying with or the people that we are in relationship with. And so that's my encouragement to you as you process through the conversations you've had over the last few months or years with the people who are going through something significant, or it's a challenging person for you to deal with, whether that is a child or a spouse or a friend or a family member or a coworker. Is it possible that a closest rod conversation, a closest rod inspection might be the solution to asking what's really going on here and why do we keep having these conversations? Is it possible that could be a solution to a deeper problem that is maybe blocking you from being able to love that person a little more, or to come and see things from their perspective? And if you have been the person who's been struck by lightning more than once and it burns and it's hard, this isn't a way of saying, well, they can just be that storm and I can just be a verbal punching bag or an emotional punching bag to them. No, that's not it at all. That's not okay either. And it's okay to call that out and say, hey, I know you're going through a lot, but it's not fair for you to take it out on me. But it is a way to step back and say, am I the problem? Or am I a person who's safe enough for this individual to be fully themselves with? And do I need to practice some compassion and some curiosity so that I can love this person well? And I just want to encourage you in that. If you're going through something right now that's hard to navigate, or you're struggling in some way with someone in your life as they go through a challenging moment, and you feel like you're caught in a closest rod moment over and over again, we'd love to help. Reach out to us at chaplaincy@fearlessfollower.org, or check out our website, fearlesschaplaincy.org. We'd love to talk with you, connect with you, help you get some resources, and continue this conversation of emotional health and caring for the people in our lives who are going through difficult times. That's all we've got for you now. We will talk with you later.